Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm Annie Dean, Global Head of Team Anywhere at Atlassian. Quick housekeeping note before we get started. Our time today is short, so we won't be taking live questions, but please feel free to add your question to the chat and we'll get to it either after this session or sometime in the near future. I'm so excited to have you all here. We're here with Anu Bharadwaj, President of Atlassian. Anu, thank you for taking the time to join us.
Hey, Annie. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to chat with Anu today, and it's such a treat for all of you who have joined us. Fun fact, Anu is the person who brought me to Atlassian, and part of the reason I chose to join the company was really the opportunity to learn from you, Anu. And along the way, you have been a tremendous supporter of Team Anywhere and a major influencer internally about how to get work done every day in a modern way. It's something that you do really organically, and I'm always interested to see what I can pick up from your working style.
That's very kind, Annie. I remember when you and I were talking about taking on the role at Atlassian, and I feel really grateful and lucky that you've been with us and led our Team Anywhere initiative over the years.
Thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure to be here. And one of the greatest parts of being here has been the focus that the company has naturally on teamwork. And it's given my team such a great playground to really experiment with learning about modern ways of working to keep our distributed teams connected and effective. We're just a month out from Team Atlassian's annual user conference. If you haven't been, it's an amazing experience. We got to meet an incredible number of customers. And we just released our latest research on state of teams. It's something that we release kind of on an annual basis. And one of the things that we were really interested in this time around was the idea that teams are kind of working harder than ever, but they're not always able to use their time in the best ways. And what we found in our research was that they're spending more time on work about work and less time on progressing the work that actually matters. So we looked at 5,000 knowledge workers on a survey basis and 100 Fortune 500 executives. And 93% of those executives told us that their teams could probably get to the same outcomes in half the time if they collaborated differently. I had a hypothesis that leaders would feel this way, but the 93% endorsement really surprised me. Tell me how you feel about this. Does this ring true from what you're hearing in, your customer conversations and in your executive circles?
Yeah, that's a pretty stark finding, isn't it? The magnitude of it is certainly surprising, but the directionality of it is very, very resonant with what I hear from customers on a day-to-day basis. The fact that you just cannot throw more people at creative work and then hope to be more productive is a fact that's brought home to us every single day for those of us that work in constructive, creative vocations. But the biggest impediment to productivity that I repeatedly hear from customers and I see all around from peers and teams is that it's really hard for people to come up with a formula or an equation to say, here's how different people can work together and be productive. At
Mhm.
Atlassian, we think a lot about teamwork. So it's a topic that I'm especially passionate about, having seen for the past 10 years how teams have evolved in using not just our products, but using modern ways of working. Like you pointed out, we at Atlassian are very much interested in the bleeding edge of ways of working because we are a teamwork company. So I personally have tried out multiple ways of working. Some are successful, some are not successful. But a common thread that is very resonant is how do you really bring teams together and make them productive, especially in an AI-enabled world? What aspects of work can AI actually assist with versus what do we rely on human beings to do? What do we rely on human creativity and ingenuity to really accomplish? And how do you really take a group of different people and constitute a team such that they're productive? Because distributed teams are now a fact of life, right? But if you think about it, our ways of working for the last several decades have not really catered to this world at all. So this is relatively new in the history of people coming together to accomplish big goals. Having distributed teams, having people work out of different time zones, not necessarily coming into an office. These are all new behaviors, new trends that we really have to be very intentional about thinking. How do we still be productive and creative in this new world?
Absolutely. One of my favorite stats that's come out over the past couple of years is a Microsoft study that found that 65% of teams were co-located. They were in the same office. They were designed that way prior to the pandemic. And that number is now 25%. So when we think about the context of collaboration, just being distributed is such a big part of that context. And I think one of the things that our research found is that just like you said, I'm not sure every executive or every president of a, tech company is saying we experiment with how we work really intentionally. And sometimes we fail, and that's okay because our goal is to figure out how to work together as a team. And that is one of the most exciting things about being at Atlassian. But we did find in our research that teams that take on that idea really are the teams that are succeeding in this environment. And when we think about the foundations for success in, as we experiment, one of those foundations is about writing. So I'm kind of giggling because I am an attorney by training. I started my career in big law. And by the time I got to Anu, I had all these ideas and pages that we were writing in Confluence. And Anu kept giving me the feedback, too many words, too many words. And I had the idea as an attorney that I was a great writer. But like so many of us, I was really orienting towards the expression of my ideas rather than getting my reader to really deeply understand me as quickly as possible. So anyone who's had the opportunity to read Anu's writing will see exactly what I mean. And when somebody serves you writing that is so clear like that, I like to say it's like a drug, because you never want to go back to reading, old Annie writing. So thanks for getting me on this straight and narrow, Anu. I really appreciate that. Um, but, I wonder if you would talk to me about why clear and concise writing is so important in the workplace, and how you implement that into your way of working on your own teams. Because as I think of you as a leader, that's one of the core ways that I would describe you. You're a real excellence in concise writing.
Yeah, that's a great question, Annie. Personally, for me, reading is how I understand the world around me, and writing is how I think. So clear, concise writing represents clear thinking. And as a leader, clear thinking that manifests in your work will then flow through to the rest of your team. So for all of us that are in positions of responsibility, positions of leadership, clear thinking is one of the greatest services we can do to our team. And especially, like you pointed out, for a distributed team. If you think about a company like Atlassian and like many of our other customers who have multinational presence, global offices, global teams working together across different locations, or even if you are a smaller company, but really you have multiple functions, multiple people with different skill sets trying to accomplish something together, it's very important to think about what scales, what actually works across such a large group of people. And
Yeah.
writing is one of the most scalable ways of sharing knowledge. So, how do you bring a large group of people together on a shared mission, on a shared set of goals? They really have to understand the why. Why is it important that we're doing what we're doing? And why do we choose this path versus all the other paths that are available to us? And when you're a small team of 4 or 5 people sitting together in a single room, talking to each other every single day, writing does not matter as much because you can just talk to each other and settle it out. But once you go beyond the 4 people in a room, it's important to have shared knowledge that persists over time, shared knowledge that is scalable to distribute across your different teams. And at Atlassian, we've had this shared writing culture for a long time, mostly as a function of we were an Australian company trying to run a global business. So really the only way we could make scalable communication work across our Australian teams, American teams, the European teams, was to write down what we're thinking. And one of the things that I have found is I consistently try to be a better writer every single day because that helps you clarify your own ideas too. So my first, second, third revs are usually garbage, and then going and revising and clarifying that, the written content also helps me clarify my thinking.
Yeah.
And that's one of the key tenets to really scale good decision making, good thinking across a large group of people.
There's so many ideas that I love, that you just shared, and I was writing down some quotes. But one of them I love is the idea of clear thinking as service leadership. The idea that by presenting clear thinking, you're enabling your teams. And I love that you describe writing as your way of thinking. I think one of the things that I run into as we study the integration of clear writing and thinking across a company is that often people don't feel like they have the time to engage in that activity. And I wonder how long it takes you. What's your process to put an idea on paper? And how much time do you give yourself to get clear on an idea?
Yeah, that's I think a great question to think about in terms of different kinds of writing too, and a point in time question. So one of the important things to remember is a deadline is better than no deadline, because once you have something that you're working towards, it forces you to write your thinking down and not wait for it to be perfect necessarily. And my process very much is to write down, to do a time boxed exercise and write down my current thinking. And one of the special things about a writing culture is how collaborative it can be.
Yeah.
So, funny story, when I started at Atlassian, I came from a large company. I came from Microsoft, where I'd worked for 10 years. And my ethos of writing and reading in Microsoft was very much keep iterating until it's perfect, and only then put out the perfect draft for everybody else to consume. Whereas I came to Atlassian, and Confluence was very much the heartbeat of how we used to run the company. We were about 500 or so people. where everyone would put out their thinking on Confluence early and often. So no draft was perfect, no page was perfect thinking. And so this was very unusual to me, and I felt nervous, thinking, wait, I'm putting out imperfect thinking. What if somebody judges me on this? What if somebody reads my content and thinks, well, that's not quite the product strategy that's buttoned down and fully baked?
Right.
But I did it nonetheless. And the next morning I came into work and I saw somebody from Poland who I had never met in my life had written 20 comments on my page. In Confluence, you can respond to pages and blog posts and stuff. And a part of me was like, oh my God, I knew this would happen. Now someone's looking at my half-baked work and commenting on this thing. But the response from my teammate in Poland was basically that they had worked on a similar idea 5 years ago that I was not aware of. And they were telling me, here are all the things that failed when we tried it the last time around. And here are the things that might actually be different now that we're trying it. So here are paths that you shouldn't go down based on past experience, which was amazing. It was a great lift and it saved me several days and weeks of futile effort. But that initial hesitation in putting out imperfect work was very much rewarded by serendipitous collaboration. So Confluence really enabled us, writing culture at Atlassian really enabled the behavior of collaboration is on by default. There is
Right.
no extra operation you have to do to say, okay, now I will start collaborating. Now I will start inviting ideas versus it's always the case. That's the natural default way of existing. And so a writing culture where you're able to put out an imperfect draft and invite commentary, invite collaboration, I think that in fact makes a lot of difference. And the last one I would say is now in an AI-enabled world, for a process of writing and sharing, there's a big leg up in terms of nobody wants to start from a blank page. So you get AI suggestions. For example, we use Confluence internally. So Confluence Editor gives you suggestions of if this is the topic, here's how you can kick off with a warm start or
Right.
rising different comments from related topics or being able to change the tone and tenor and either shorten it or lengthen it based on what the requirement is. So I think that is definitely a big leg up in terms of writing.
I was just trying to, my team is always trying to figure out how to explain complicated topics that we want people to understand about working. And there was a topic that was really confounding us. And we were like, you know what, let's just ask Atlassian Intelligence.
Yeah.
And it gave us a great response that we were able to iterate on, which I think, is the habits that we'll start to develop as we have this kind of teammate relationship with AI to keep pushing us forward. But one of the things that, I think is so interesting in what you just shared is the idea that writing things down in a digital format powers our LLMs, they power our digital ecosystems, and they give us the opportunity to let AI find things for us. So when we talk about how information is shared today, our research and state of teams found some really interesting challenges in that world. We found that teams are saying that responding to notifications, 65% of teams told us that responding to notifications was more important than progressing work. And I think that has to do not with teams having the bad intent, but just being part of, ways of working that kind of take our attention in that way. And technology has made it really easy to share information in bits and pieces, but we need good systems to share information with everyone in a clear and organized way. Because then that's how we get time back, because AI can go discover it for us. So how is your team taking a systems approach, an AI enabled approach to information sharing and knowledge sharing?
It's one that we think about a lot because not just in terms of our own efficiency and productivity, but also in terms of how do we then take this and put it in service of our customers? How do we then bottle up these practices and share with our customers about here's what we tried and here's what worked and here's what didn't work?
Yeah.
As a consequence of that, we recently talked about the system of work across all of our Atlassian products. So think of system of work really as an operating system of work products, practices, and processes. So
Mm.
across Atlassian's portfolio of different products, we have 300,000 customers using 12 different products and product lines across the board. But really, how do you bring all of them together into one coherent, cogent system of work such that all of your teams across all of your organization, across your entire organization, is really connected to one common source of knowledge, is connected to one common system of work.
Yeah.
That really is the way we think about it, and we use a lot of our own products internally. So the system of work very much evolved from how we bring all of our products together. But more importantly, no matter what tooling and products you have, the ways of working matter a lot. And this is exactly the thrust that Atlassian has in terms of, if we have to build the future of work for our customers, we have to live the future of work ourselves, which is why things like Team Anywhere, asynchronous work, we think about these a lot, and we're on the bleeding edge of adopting a lot of modern work practices. So the
Yeah.
system of work has a practices component of ways of working, where we describe the philosophy of teamwork, which really goes back to the systems thinking that you were talking about, in terms of how do you build a system? What is a system that works for your organization? Because every organization is different, but with
Right.
a common set of principles that we've found are scaling really well. One of them is asynchronous over synchronous. So, for example, I do a lot of Loom video updates for my team, which is a good way of sharing knowledge systemically across the entire organization, such that it's available for recall, has the richness of video, and has the ability for people to comment and react interactively with a richer form of sharing information.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think as leaders adopt these new ways of working, your Loom videos are something that your team benefits from, of course, but it's also something that people on my team watch and that people throughout the organization watch. So we can understand, how is our president approaching her organization's work right now, and what can we learn from her? And so it gives the entire organization the opportunity to benefit from, how you're thinking about things. Is there anything else about your work days that, help you drive, a sense of shared knowledge, of building shared goals or progress that you think is worth sharing with our audience today?
Yeah, definitely. So one of my fundamental philosophies is that good companies cascade goals, but great companies cascade purpose. So it's
Mm,
important as a leader to think about, how do you actually explain to your entire organization over and over, such that it makes sense in the context of their work, why we're doing what we're doing, what success means for the company, and how does the work that they do on a day-to-day basis contribute back to the success of the company. And repeated consistent communication in multiple modes is very helpful to do that. So Loom is one example of it, but also we use a lot of our own products which help us with sharing asynchronous updates and shared progress across the company. Typical tactics like doing a town hall then take on a different meaning. For instance, we do a town hall, then we record it, and then we share it back as means of asynchronous consumption later. But also, different people really appreciate different modes of communication. So we also typically put out text format blogs about the whole thing. Like you pointed out, Atlassian Intelligence is able to summarize what were the key announcements that happened in the town hall, how did
right.
my team feature in the town hall. So really setting up this holistic system of understanding why we're doing what we're doing, and having the ability to share progress across the company happens across multiple tools and multiple practices.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things about Atlassian is we have this goals platform where you can see any goal at the organization that, and any project that contributes to it. So for instance, if I want to make sure that a new entered executive team are aware of something that my team is doing, I can, send the ticket related to my goal over to her chief of staff, and she, can then make sure that Anu is aware of it. So and you can follow it in a tweet size update, on a weekly basis if that's something that, she wants to be following. So it's really cool because you can get access to any goal across the company in a way that is super easy to consume. And that's why Atlassian is the teamwork company, right?
Absolutely.
So Anu, we're going to move to a lightning round. And for those of you who don't know Anu or follow her internally on her book summaries that she's producing, she reads, I mean, I would say dozens and dozens of books a year, but is that accurate? Is it
Yes.
more than that? Okay, dozens and dozens. All right, so what book are you reading right now?
So I tend to read multiple books at a time. So maybe give me two instances I can share. One is a book called Life on Mars, a compendium of poems by Tracy K. Smith, whose dad worked on the Hubble telescope. So it's a fascinating book of poems about her memories of her dad working on something so seminal in science and how that made an impact on her. I really love that book, and I go back to read it several times, and very timely in terms of Father's Day. And a second one that I really enjoyed reading is called Same as Ever by Morgan Housel, who's a financial journalist whose earlier work was called Psychology of Money. And he really talks about in a fast changing world, and it's very much true for us working in the tech industry, everything changes so quickly. He exhorts the reader to think about what are things that don't change, what are things that remain constant, human psychology, the human need for connection, what really offers meaning, purpose, and how do you really think about harnessing those when trying to achieve long-term goals? So at Atlassian, where we try to be 100-year company,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that attracted me to Atlassian initially, is we really think about building for the long term. So it inspired me to think about what are the things that don't change when it comes to company building, or what are the values that you hold constant as you make progress as a company.
Awesome. I love it. I'm going to have to pick up both of those books. Describe your ideal workday in one word.
Fulfilling, because there are productive days and unproductive days, but as long as you feel like you're making progress towards a meaningful, purposeful goal that feels fulfilling, that's what keeps me going.
I love it. Me too. And one workday ritual that you can't live without.
Oh, it's my morning coffee walk. It's a 10-minute walk to the cafe and a 10-minute walk back. And it's one of those times where I feel like I'm decompressed. And it's a signal to my brain to begin engaging and start the workday. And it also serves as a virtual commute for those of us that are working in Team Anywhere and the offices are home.
Exactly. I love the Team Anywhere call out, because we got to, save millions of minutes for our employees on commuting by letting them work from anywhere. And but we still got to get a commute in there. It's just a 10-minute walk to the coffee shop. That's super lovely to enjoy. So Anu, thank you so much for joining us today. To all of you listening, please check out our State of Teams research. It will be linked in the chat. And you can get more details on how to make teams effective as possible for their workdays. Thank you, Anu. It's great chatting with you always.
Thank you so much for having me, Annie. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.